first stage. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same is true on the second stage, a few minutes thereafter. T minus 23 minutes is when second stage RP1 loading wrapped up. T minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process got underway. That's when SpaceX is conditioning the feed lines at the pad prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. We see that manifest visually as the so-called big vent that sets up second stage LOX load to begin. That's our next milestone upcoming, and that'll start at the 16-minute mark. T minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. That involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before flight, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence gets underway. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, reclines about 13 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket here at Vandenberg. It stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before launch, the first stage LOX tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute after that, at which point the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as the call is issued for the Falcon 9 to be in startup, controls handed over from ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch 45 seconds before flight. The engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. That's coming up once again in 7:53 p.m. Pacific, 10:53 p.m. Eastern, 03:53 UTC, or in T minus 17 minutes and 39 seconds. Time now T minus 17 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. About a minute away from second stage LOX load beginning. It's not very often that the NRO has a lot to say when it comes to really much of what it does, specifically with the proliferated architecture. That said, during last month's Space Force Association's Space Power Conference in Orlando, they did have some representatives from the NRO and the U.S. Space Force take part in one of a number of panels that were held over a series of 3 days. This one happened to be the final day of the conference, and they did touch on the proliferated architecture, so want to go ahead and go to a little bit of sound that we have here. This is from Mr. T.J. Lincoln, the National Reconnaissance Office. He is the Director of Mission Operations Directorate for the NRO, talking at a bit of a high level, but good to hear some insight on the proliferated architecture and some of its goals. Let's listen in. Again, this is T.J. Lincoln.
You hear about the proliferated architectures. We talk about that today. We operate multiple dozens of exquisite capability. We have done that for since 1961. But we are going to a proliferated of hundreds of capabilities across different phenomenologies. That's based on high-speed compute, a global network, advanced intelligence, artificial intelligence well, which is going to really enable us to do rapid tasking. It's going to be direct access in theater so that those folks can task. But also working with our Guardians out there as we start to do that global allocation and mission management mission. That's where the Guardians are going to bring to bear how we get those allocations into the fighter. That's also going to also have meantime revisit rates are going to be significantly reduced so we can maintain those tracks and targets. But it's not done just on the proliferated architecture. We need those other national technical means to close all those areas. They also will tip and queue, and also be able to do orchestration so that one sensor can see something, tip another sensor, and so we can rapidly get after that intelligence challenge. And then it's all brought together by the amazing ground systems of our Ground Enterprise Directorate and our Communications Directorate, because you need those. That's the secret sauce to get that data out to the people that need it.
And again, that was a clip from part of our coverage of the Space Force Association Space Power Conference. Now T-minus 14 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. We should be getting views of the Falcon 9 rocket here in just a moment, but before we do, want to go to one more piece of tape from that conference. You'll hear, as well as from TJ Lincoln, also be hearing from Colonel Eric Zierabinski, who is the director of the Office of Space Launch for the U.S. Space Force, talking about the role of automation on the proliferated architecture. Before we go to that clip, just real briefly want to thank a few folks for their support tonight. Our thanks to Red Sky for a $2 super chat, Jimmy C. Candle, Cindy Kirkman with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Cindy. And thanks to Toby Wobe for joining us the channel membership again at the pad leader level. Glad to have you with us, Toby, who then turns around and gifts 5 memberships. Appreciate that generosity. To our 5 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Toby in the live chat if you haven't already. Clip I was just teasing. Once again, you're going to be hearing from TJ Lincoln, the Director of Mission Operations Directorate with the NRO, as well as Colonel Eric Zierabinski, the Director of the Office of Space Launch for the U.S. Space Force, about how automation is set to play a role with the proliferated architecture.
Automation doesn't start with the proliferated architecture, quite honestly. I've challenged our team since I took over in 2019 to automate even today some of our exquisite systems, because the best use of our amazing talent within the NRO, within operations, isn't actually necessarily being out there sending commands to a vehicle or prosecuting the collection mission. If I can automate those things in the day of the life, I can take those people, those incredibly talented people, put them in those places where I'm challenged. How am I going to develop better collection strategies? How am I going to develop tactics, techniques, and procedures to thwart threats? How am I going to take those talented to do operational planning and integration with U.S. Space Command? So anything I can operate in a day in the life of operations absolutely is essential, and we've done that already. Gone from, let's say 17 folks on a crew to 3 operating an entire overhead constellation. That's pretty amazing. So automation is absolutely incredibly important today, not just as the proliferated architectures are delivered. The good thing about automation, at least with the proliferated, is it's being baked in early on. So as the officer lead for the NRO, I'm demanding those things are built into the system, because there's no way to operate a proliferated multiple hundreds of satellites the same way we do today. And so the mission management has to happen. The duty cycle tasking has to happen. The retasking has to happen in an automated way with humans on the loop to be able to tweak that, to make sure that we're meeting the operational assessment needs that we have to. So that's where we need to really leverage the automations to get after that piece of it. So that's kind of where I see it going today, but we're not waiting for proliferation to automate and to really drive that. But operations will change, because now you have to also be very cognizant of all those systems that you're operating maybe in a traditional sense from a protect and defend, but then how you're going to protect and defend those proliferated, that proliferated constellation going forward.
It's a mouthful.
Can I add a little on I'll go to the back end of part of this. Is automation, AI, ML is also, it's not just about the proliferation, it's about how do I get the data out faster, right? So the NRO has been typically known, right, we get data out there in hours and maybe minutes. We've got to get to seconds, right? We've got to get the data in the hands of decision makers and warfighters within seconds. And automation, AI, and ML are going to make that happen.
Yeah, and there's things such as auto-target recognition and the processing to be able to know what that is when we image it, or what that signal is, so that it's put into those warfighting tools and those displays, so that they don't have to make they have to interpret the data. Right, to your point there, incredibly important as we move forward as well.
Now T-minus 9 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. Again, those clips you were just seeing were part of our coverage of the Space Force Association's Space Power Conference, the second annual Space Power Conference that took place just last month. Looking at the conference schedule, it'll be another busy year on that front. We'll be at the SpaceCom conference here in Orlando coming up at the end of this month. So if you happen to spot myself or either my colleagues around there, feel free to flag us down, say hello. We love meeting folks out in the world. And we are just now getting our first views of the Falcon 9 rocket there at Space Launch Complex 4 East. You can see a clear view down at Vandenberg as fueling continues with the Falcon 9 rocket. We're now less than a minute away from the start of the engine chill sequence. According to the SpaceX commentator, both the range is green, weather is green. That was a tracking camera looking at the moon as SpaceX is just showing off the visibility there at Vandenberg. So should get some nice tracking views of the Falcon 9 as it makes its descent. Because there are Starshield satellites on board for the NRO, they will not be showing second stage views following stage separation. So at that point, there will just be onboard camera views from the Falcon 9's first stage. As SpaceX is getting ready to post some graphics talking about the Falcon 9 rocket, let's go ahead and talk about SpaceX's workhorse vehicle, which stands 70 meters or 229 feet tall, has diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. The fairing halves flying today. One is flying for its 9th time, the other for its 16th time. Payload fairings, after separation, splashed down in the Pacific Ocean under the support of parachutes. Second stage is powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle, which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, producing more than 220,500 pounds of thrust. Falcon 9 first stage represents the 2/3 the vehicle's height. This particular booster is B1071, which is going for its 22nd flight today. In fact, the booster that is supporting tomorrow morning's Starlink launch, that'll be booster 1067, which will be making a record-breaking 25th launch and landing attempt. Falcon 9 booster supporting this launch is going to be landing on that drone ship. That is, of course, I Still Love You, positioned out in the Pacific Ocean. If successful, this will mark the 116th booster landing on this particular drone ship and the 394th booster landing to date. Taking a look at our live chat real quick here, I want to thank a few folks for their support. But first off, broad thank you to the now more than 13,000 of you who are joining with us live. If you haven't already, be sure to click that like button to allow some more folks to find their way into this live coverage. Now, T-minus 4 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. The strong back retract sequence is now underway. You see those clamp arms opening up just beneath the payload fairings. The transport erector will then move away from the Falcon 9 rocket about 13 degrees and stay in that position until liftoff. There you see the TE now in motion. Want to thank Stephen Remy for a $5 super chat, saying thanks for your great coverage as always. Thank you, Stephen, for supporting us in this coverage. Also want to thank channel member Artemis on two fronts. One for a very generous $100 super chat. Really appreciate that, Artemis, on this first Vandenberg launch of the year. See the comment, and respectfully would try to keep things a little more serious than doing accents that are not mine. So I'll just give it a more demure Leroy Jenkins as a tip of the hat to Artemis. I also want to thank them for gifting 100 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that level of generosity, Artemis. Thank you so much. For the call for Stage 1 LOX load being complete, just awaiting the same to be true on the Falcon 9's second stage. And the Falcon 9 will be fully fueled for liftoff. Also want to thank Daniel Fletcher joining us with the channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome, Daniel. SpaceX reports no issues being tracked as we're now just about 2.5 minutes from liftoff. And thanks to Space Pony for a $2 super chat, asking if I'm going to be hightailing it to Starbase after New Glenn. Unfortunately, it seems the fates will not align for me personally to travel down to Starbase this go around. There's just too much happening here in Florida for me to make that trek. Plus, there's always the possibility that New Glenn may slip another day, and so I'll be here covering that, and we'll have our forces down in Florida alongside our streaming partners Lab Padre to cover Starship Flight 7. And of course, midweek next week, we're also looking at the launch of Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost lunar lander and iSpace's Hakuto R. So I'll be here to help cover that as well. For the call for second stage LOX load complete, you're now seeing the ground gas closeouts. Coming up in about 15 or so seconds, we should be hearing the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup. Let's listen in.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Good call there. Next call we're waiting for is the launch director to give their go for launch. That's coming up here in just seconds.
LD is go for launch.
And with that go for launch, we're 40 seconds away from liftoff. So we're going to step back and listen to the final 30 seconds of the count, and we'll be back with you on the other side for additional commentary.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9. Go SpaceX, go NROL 153.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
At T plus 30 seconds and counting, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Slick 4E at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. Now coming up shortly, the vehicle will be passing through max Q, which is the point in the mission profile where the vehicle experiences the greatest amount of aerodynamic pressure.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
Now, it doesn't look like we're going to catch it in the view today, but as many of you know, there are multiple wildfires currently burning around the Southern California area. Our thoughts go out to those affected. Good call out there for Max Q. Our thoughts go out to those affected by the fires, and we here at SpaceX want to give a huge thank you to the firefighters working to put them out, as well as the other emergency crews and volunteers.
Telemetry nominal.
As well as the emergency crews and volunteers working to keep everyone safe. And we heard that good call out there for Max Q, which again is when the vehicle experiences the greatest amount of aerodynamic stress. Now coming up next, we'll have 3 events happening in quick succession, starting with...
chill.
Good call out there. We'll have 3 events happening in quick succession, starting with MECO, followed by Stage SEP and SES-1. Main engine cutoff, or MECO, is where all 9 Merlin 1D engines shut down to slow the vehicle down in preparation for stage separation, which is where the first stage separates from the second stage. Followed by this, the MVAC engine on the second stage will light, which is called out as Second Engine Start 1 or SES-1. Now this engine burn lasting several minutes will propel the second stage and the payload to orbit.
A good ascension of the Falcon 9 rocket so far, beginning SpaceX's first Vandenberg launch of 2025. Let's listen for those call outs for these events, starting with MECO.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
All good callouts, and our last view of the Falcon 9's upper stage that we'll see during this flight, that look up at the Merlin vacuum engine. Again, as the SpaceX commentator noted, at the request of the National Reconnaissance Office, SpaceX will not be showing upper stage views of the Falcon 9 rocket from here on, so our last glimpse was our last glimpse. Did hear the call for fairing separation, though. Seeing the lights of the California coastline as the Falcon 9 first stage booster continues its climb. Rocket is flying in a southeasterly trajectory going along the coast of California and Mexico, targeting a landing once again on the SpaceX drone ship called, of course, I Still Love You. Coming up on the 4th minute into flight. Start of the entry burn will begin at about T plus 6 minutes and 11 seconds. Last about 20 seconds in total. Got the call that the Falcon 9 first and second stages are both following nominal trajectories, so all going well with this first Vandenberg flight of 2025 so far. Taking a look at the telemetry data there in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, it appears the booster has reached its apogee and is now making its descent towards the drone ship out there in the Pacific Ocean. You'll see the speedometer continue to climb until the start of that entry burn, when SpaceX will reignite 3 out of the 9 Merlin engines on the Falcon 9's first stage, beginning to slow the vehicle down quite dramatically. So you'll see that speedometer number begin to plummet as the vehicle is slowed down by the power of the Merlins as well as increased atmospheric drag. Now a little more than 5 minutes into flight. A look up now through the inner stage there on the Falcon 9's booster. Once again, the entry burn set to begin at about T plus 6 minutes and 11 seconds, so we're less than a minute away from that milestone. This booster, after making its 20-second liftoff, looking for a good 20-second landing. Now about 20 seconds till entry burn.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Good call for the start of entry burn, and there you see it now beginning on your screen. Once again, this burn set to last about 20 seconds in total. When New Glenn's first stage booster goes for its landing on its particular landing vessel named Jacqueline, it will also go through a similar sequence where it makes an entry burn using 3 out of its 7 BE-4 engines for a brief entry burn, and then during the landing sequence it will reignite its 3 gimbaling engines, then pare that down from 3 to 1 in the final seconds of the landing burn as its landing legs are deployed. Now a little more than 7 minutes into flight. We're coming up on the start of the landing burn here for this Falcon 9 rocket. That's coming up beginning at about T plus 7 minutes and 48 seconds. Falcon 9 now transonic, traveling below the speed of sound. Less than 10 seconds to the landing burn. Let's go ahead and listen in for the call out.
Stage 2
landing
terminal
burn.
guidance.
And there was that call out for the start of the Falcon 9 first stage landing burn.
Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And there you have it, successful landing of our Falcon 9 booster on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, in the Pacific Ocean. As a reminder, this was the 22nd launch and landing for this first stage.
And with a good 20-second landing of that first stage booster, the mission still continues for SpaceX, but because the NRO has requested, let's go ahead and listen to the SpaceX commentator for a second.
Free service in the area indicated here on the map until February 10th. The Starlink and T-Mobile teams have also enabled basic texting through our direct-to-cell satellites, so you can now text loved ones, text 911, and receive emergency alerts to your DTC-enabled cell phone. Make sure to follow @Starlink on X for updates as we work with local response teams on further opportunities to help, and check starlink.com/LA wildfires for more information. Thank you to our customer for entrusting us with today's mission, and we'd also like to thank the range and FAA for their support. And if you're
At this point, the upper stage is now in a coast phase and will continue on in the parking orbit until about T plus 52 minutes and 27 seconds. There will be a brief 2-second burn to circularize the orbit, and then there will be a deployment at an unspecified